Morning once again, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Eric Malice. I will be your host once again for another 3-day panel hosted by CorpGini and our other sponsors, which I'll get to in a few minutes. For those of you who have joined us before on our continuing series, welcome back. And for those of you who are just joining now, it's a pleasure to have you. I understand most of our audience and panelists are in India. You can see behind me, I'm actually dialing in. It's the evening here. I'm dialing in from beautiful California. Been sheltering in place like many of us, and first and foremost, I hope that everyone joining us is safe and making the best of this unfortunate global pandemic. So we're here today because we're going to talk about the future of healthcare, pharma, and allied HPA industries. From today for the next 3 days, we're going to have the following format. We're going to begin with a panel discussion with experts in the field who are going to be discussing topics like the industry impact and business continuity post-COVID-19. We'll talk a little bit about pharma and healthcare's new normal going forward. We'll look at digital health, opportunities for smart transformation and technology coming out of this pandemic, as well as transitioning clinical studies from the traditional approach to decentralized approach, some regulatory perspective, and then how we can all benefit from this, hopefully going forward. In each of these 3 days, after the panel discussion, we will then have a handful of startups that are actually working very hard to provide solutions to some of the challenges around healthcare and pharma, particularly being faced now by COVID-19. Then we will actually have the opportunity for the audience to ask questions. Each of you can see on your Zoom, there's a Q&A where you can post questions. Unfortunately, we won't have time to get to everyone, of course, but I have a team curating some of the most common questions that are being asked, and so we'll be able to provide a few of those. And then there will be a few moments throughout the event where we'll post a survey. The goal of the survey is to understand kind of where different people in the audience are on some of these issues, get some feedback from you on what you'd like to see more of, so that we can continue to provide high quality programs for you. Also, we have a very special guest who I will introduce in just a moment. But first, I just want to thank our sponsor and give you a little bit more information. It's CorpGini, which is a global innovation platform for corporations to define, discover, collaborate, and engage with emerging solutions across the United States, European Union, India, and other global markets. I am an advisor to CorpGini. I am also a co-founder and partner in Talis Partners, which is a legal and strategy consulting firm, primarily focused on the startup community. We work with startups and investors to help companies scale and grow, both from outside general counsel as well as strategic advisors with a real strategy focus. Also co-founder and CMO of Linkcode Labs, which is a computer vision and AI startup helping manufacturing companies identify and eliminate product defects. I also teach a course in entrepreneurship at a local university here. So that's a little bit of background on myself as well as an agenda for the event. It is now my distinct pleasure of introducing a very special guest that we have today. To kick off this 3-day platform, I'd like to introduce Shri Ashwini Kumar Choubey, Honorable Minister of State for Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. He will be giving a short note addressing his views on the current situation, following which I will introduce the co-founder of CorpGini, and then we will kick off the panel discussion and the startup presentations. So Shri Ashwini Kumar Choubey, are you ready, sir?
He'll be joining in another 5 minutes. He's in call with the PMO.
No,
He'll be joining in another 5
got
minutes.
it.
We will let you know the moment he gets in.
Sure. That's a good excuse to have for being a few minutes late. No problem at all. So then I'd like to now introduce my good friend, co-founder and CEO of CorpGini, Amit Jain, who you can see right now. He also spoke a little bit before. He's based here in Silicon Valley, California with me. For the past 12 years, Amit has been focused on the India-US corridor, helping corporates and startups on cross-border transactions. In the past, Amit has worked with Citibank, PwC, and KPMG doing M&A involving technology acquisitions, IP migrations, high-VOS divestments, greenfield investments, et cetera. He's also co-founder of Cross-Border Startup Accelerator and seed fund Z Nation Labs, through which he's invested in 35 startups. He's also a regular speaker at various forums in Silicon Valley and conducts regular workshops on Silicon Valley mindset. Amit, would you like to say a few words about CorpGini and the event today?
Sure. Thanks, Eric. As usual, hi everyone. My name is Amit Jain. I'm CEO and co-founder of CorpGini. Our attempt at CorpGini is to ensure that how do we help corporates as well as startup bridge the gap of collaboration. We've been doing this for a while, but kind of now it is totally digitized. And since we have some time now, what I'll do is I'll quickly like to run you through what we are doing at CorpGini, and that might give a little more background about how is CorpGini functioning.
CorpGini.
Oh, so Eric, can you see my screen? So CorpGini is a platform for corporates to define, discover, and collaborate and engage with solutions for global markets. It's a technology platform where a digital dashboard can be created for the corporates. They can define the solutions they seek or the problems they want to solve, and then they can collaborate with solution providers, mainly the startups and the solution providers, to either acquire, do investments, or just collaborate for the solutions. Uh, the basic thesis why we kind of wanted to do innovation and CorpGini was on the four pillars of innovation. What we believe, and particularly this is kind of my belief, is that there are four types of innovation. One is incremental innovation, disruptive innovation, radical and architectural innovation. While most of the corporates can afford as well as do the incremental innovation, it is difficult to do incremental innovation in-house without spending billions of dollars in R&D. And that's where there is a need for collaboration to do disruptive innovation and radical innovation. And there are enough and more being spent by the governments on doing R&Ds, but it has to see the light of the day by the collaboration with the corporate. So that's where CorpGini fits into, to kind of bring those radical disruptive architecture innovations to the corporates. This is an engagement model, which is a technology platform where we have defined a technology platform in five key modules. One is a signal, where a corporate will be able to set the roadmap of the innovation they need, and through our AI, we will be able to kind of showcase what kind of things which are happening on those signals which you have set up. Then you collaborate amongst your team to find out what you need to prioritize, define the OKRs or the key results you want to derive out of this innovation, set up a blueprint, and then Cadence is our engagement model, where on Cadence you can discover, connect, collaborate with solution providers through CorpGini platform. It's a comprehensive tool for the innovation to be in a box, and we think that this is where we'll be able to do an engagement. We are poised to kind of make real engagement and collaboration, and this is some of the early thing. We've been just in business for last 6 months, and these are some of the milestones which we were able to achieve, where the solutions were able to see demos from the corporates, where they want to kind of engage with them. And there are 1,500 decision makers on the platform which we are now connected to, who are looking at CorpGini for solutions. We have global and international Indian corporates who are on the platform, who are looking and seeking solutions, and we would be glad if you would also want to join. Some of the previous panel discussions which we did, and we had the pleasure to have even Mr. Ratan Tata, who was addressing on our last panel to the corporates and to the real estate, particularly from an architectural perspective. 30,000 corporate attendees who have kind of joined CorpGini platform so far. We were fortunate to see a lot of traction in terms of how people were joining and using Zoom as a service for kind of joining these webinars, and there were 1 million total minutes spent on by the participants on the CorpGini platform. We have now set up this for the healthcare, pharma, and allied industries. We have a very distinct panel who would be talking on various topics, industry challenges, opportunities, and the startup solutions over the next 3 days. And I would urge you to join each of these panel discussions to understand the problem statements as well as challenges, and at the same time the opportunity which is there for the pharma industry. Without any ado, I'm ready. Whenever Mr. Chobe is ready, I would just kind of do it. This is some of the media, traction which we're able to do. We were also participating in the Champions of Change, which was organized by the Niti Aayog to bring innovation in partnership with the government of India. And these are some of the things which we've been doing at CorpGini and Z Nation Lab. You can connect us on tanya@corpgini.com. We are based out of Silicon Valley and India. Myself and Eric are based here in Silicon Valley, and we also have a team in India. Do we have Dr. Reddy? Do we have the minister? So if not, I think we will just
introduction part.
Sir, sir is he's in phone call. It's important phone call.
No worries. So what we'll do is we will start. We'll introduce Nilesh, who's the moderator for the panel discussion today, and we will initiate the panel discussion. And then once the sir is ready, we would invite him and ask him to address the nation and the panel audience here. Nilesh, do you want to join the podium and introduce the panel?
Yes. Hi, Amit. Good morning, everybody.
Thanks, Nilesh. I will now switch off, sorry, and I will hand it over to you, Eric and you, for the panel discussion.
So thanks, Amit. Appreciate going through that. Apologies that the minister will be joining in a few minutes. So now what we'll do is move into the panel discussion where Nilesh Jain, co-founder and CEO of Clean Advantage and venture partner at Z Nation Labs, is actually going to introduce himself and then the panelists, and he's going to be moderating the discussion. Then, as I said earlier, we'll take a few minutes at the end to answer some audience questions, which I will provide, Nilesh, after you signal that you're finished up with some of your questions, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect.
So please.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. I'm sure everybody is as excited as I am to have our panel today and really discuss the need of the hour. I mean, we've seen over the last almost 2.5 months under lockdown how things are shaping up, especially from a healthcare perspective. And suddenly there is a lot of focus on how our pharmaceutical industry or the pharma industry is going to step up and look at innovation in a very different way. Obviously, this is not just an India challenge, but it's a global challenge. And to what our Prime Minister had announced in terms of being Atmanirbhar, it really applies into the pharma industry and how we can be self-reliant. With that, I'm really excited to announce our panelist members. Dr. Gupta is Chairman and Technical Committee of GLP Program and Expert Committee of Drugs and Pharmaceutical DST. Very renowned member. I'm pleased to have Dr. Gupta on the panel today. Mr. Sudarshan Jain, Secretary General, India Pharmaceutical Alliance and Pharma ED of Abbott, India. Again, welcome, Mr. Sudarshan. Mr. Dinesh Dua, Chairman of Pharmexcil. Welcome, Mr. Dinesh. Mr. Arvind Pandian, Strategic Partnerships at USAID. A very important role to see how contributions happen from an international perspective into India. Mr. Umang Chaturvedi, Head of Policy, India and Emerging Markets at Mylan Labs. Ms. Jasrita Dhir, Head Brand Marketing and CSR at Fortis. Pleasure to have you, Ms. And Mr. Alok De, CTO Samsung. And I'm sure we're all excited to hear about how industry is coping up with innovations, especially in healthcare. With that, I would ask Mr. Gupta to kind of open up with a leading question. Mr. Gupta, a lot of challenges, a lot of pressures have come up on the pharma industry today. We're hearing multiple things on how rapid tests have failed, how PC tests are coming up, how the startup ecosystem is working and gearing towards coming back with a solution. And I'm sure we're seeing a lot of, younger generation, new companies and the mature companies coming together and trying to solve this problem. So with that, Mr. Gupta, I'd love to get your opinion and understand, how the government is actually playing an active role, helping a lot of these companies improve the process, because we all know, vaccine is not something that's going to come out in the next 30 days. With that, Mr. Gupta, I'll let you lead the conversation.
Thank you very much, Nilesh. And I will be focusing primarily what your question is, that what are the challenges pharmaceutical industry and in general the drug development process people involved in are facing now. Any drug development requires clinical trial, and a clinical trial in the entire globe due to COVID-19 situation is now in a difficult situation. I would say there are three types of challenges in a clinical trial. One is a new trial beginning, and that is almost standstill. No clinical trial, new trials are being taking place because of the uncertain situation of the involvement or including the clinical trial volunteers or patients. And the major problem in the ongoing clinical trial is how to monitor them, how to get the data from them, how to ensure that the patient or the subject visit hospital in due time, or his clinical situation is closely monitored. And therefore, there is a large number of missing data. And if there is a missing data and a large missing data, and then ultimately a conclusion is drawn on that missing data by the regulator, it is a challenge whether that decision, that conclusion is acceptable or then translational is a challenge. And therefore, the important thing with the startups, the important issue with the pharmaceutical industry is the increasing use of artificial intelligence. Can we use artificial intelligence to predict more accurate outcome based on the data which is available, which is shrinking, which is missed data? So that is important thing. The another challenge which can be solved by artificial intelligence, and the entire pharma industry and the scientists are looking towards, is can we have a decentralized clinical trial or remote trial? That means instead of patient coming to the hospital for clinical trial enrollment, take the clinical trial to the patient's home. And here the clinical trial site becomes the patient's home, and the patient's the day-to-day patient's clinical caregiver becomes the clinical trial investigator. The main important issue in this is the industry and the academic institution have to make the clinical trial protocol so simple that it can be done by the home caregiver. All trials cannot be done, but some trials can be done, and international FDA regulations and including Indian regulations are now looking the possibility how this can be done. That is one important thing.
So Mr. Gupta, I'm actually jumping out of my seat right now.
Yeah.
To your point, I think what you said, how can technology really help the trial process? I've been a part of certain discussions as a part of my startup, and we've actually looked at that, and it's a great point. Also, a request to all my panelists, if you can turn on your videos so our audience can see you. I think, Mr. Gupta, also there are a lot of challenges, and I would also have Mr. Jain and Mr. Dua address this. When we talk about clinical trials, there are a lot of regulatory and ethical challenges. And also, how does government actually help? Because, I've been very closely associated with manufacturing of trauma implants. And the applicability of these trials and regulations is so standardized from a GOI perspective that how do we actually help, new startups bringing innovation in this sector? So with that, I'll open the stage for Mr. Jain and Mr. Dua also, along with Mr. Gupta. Go ahead.
I think you raised a very fundamental issue, and that is the concern every startup, every settled industry is trying to make. And the government of India, the regulators have responded very positively. The Department of Biotechnology has constituted on the direction of the Government of India a board which is chaired by our CGM chairman and also by DCGI. And the mandate is that if there is anything related to COVID, it should be immediately addressed too. If anything which is a repurposing drug, the Drug Controller General has to hear it overnight, and that's what they are doing it. They're sitting in the office and responding to the such application, and within 2 days, the applications are reviewed and approved. The issue of devices is much simplified now, and the regulators are expected to respond, which they are doing very fast. There is a possibility and there is a provision of a waiver of several clinical trial, the toxicological data, the clinical trial phase, and the many mutagenicity and other studies in case we know how the drug is, the background of the drug. So these are the regulatory fast track approval method which is now available in this unusual scenario.
Good. I think to your point, we'll have Mr. Jain kind of address, how this is actually helping expedite the processes right now without adding a lot of risk. Because when we talk about releasing certain drugs, we're talking about millions of people on the other end, right? And if we are putting in shortcuts and making sure also of safety parameters at the same time. So I think I'll let Mr. Jain kind of address some of the aspect of that and see how India actually steps up to the plate. Mr. Sudarshan, can you hear me? I guess or Mr. Dinesh, is he also on the call?
Yes, I am. Nilesh, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes. I can't see your video though, Mr. Dua. I think coming back to the question, right? Like Mr. Gupta mentioned, we've simplified a lot of processes and we've escalated a lot of the applications that are coming in and giving priorities. From an industry perspective, how do you see that panning out and helping release new drugs or release new products into the market?
Thank you very much, Nilesh and rest of you. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure. I put on my video. I don't know why is my picture not coming. That's very surprising. I think the admin can help us get my picture right.
I'll ask them to.
But nonetheless, I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, so Nilesh, let me give you a perspective of the clinical trials. Now, let's look at India. India, by no means, is an innovation drug producer or an R&D-driven powerhouse. No. India is basically a generic powerhouse. It controls 30% of the generic drugs in the world, 40% of the US generic space, which is about $120 billion, and 30% of Europe, and every third pill which is being consumed in the United States in the generic space is from India. Now, so, when you file for a generic copycat version of a generic, see, in a generic drug, you have to copy either the innovator or the reference listed drug, RLD. And that's the same case in case of a dossier. In case of, just one sec, I think my video is going to be coming in now. Just give me a sec, please. Anyway, let the video come in and we'll see what happens.
No problem.
So you see, Nilesh, it's in the generic space where we export close to about $21 billion worth of drugs, and the domestic market also is $21 billion worth of drug. So when you create a copycat version of a generic drug, it has to go through clinical trials. Now, these are different kind of clinical trials vis-a-vis the innovation drug. Hey, what you do is, based on your laboratory data, your data for the purpose of analysis, right? That's then tested depending on the nature of the drug. That's then tested on 32 patients, single arm, double arm, depending on how complicated the molecule is. And I'm very proud to say that, India is a great destination for doing this bioequivalence clinical trials, right? For the generic drugs. We do this very cost efficiently. We have at least close to about 40 odd bioequivalence clinical centers in India, which are approved both by US FDA as well as by the European Union. And that's where we do it at practically about 50 to 60% of the cost of what you end up doing in the West. So here is a good combination and amalgam of conducting bioequivalence clinical trials very efficiently, thereby the overhead burden of the clinical trial does not sit on top of your dossier, which is ANDA in US, and European dossier in case of Europe, and Japan also, because we went to Japan very recently and we're doing reasonably well over there. So that being said, that's one part of the clinical trial, right? There are absolutely no issues insofar as bioequivalence clinical trials are concerned. What Dr. Gupta has been referring to is the innovation drugs. You know, when the patented molecules come into India, they need to undergo a little bit of a trial. That's another part of the clinical trials, right? That's where the ethics come in. Now, here is another issue, which is where India got into a little bit of a trouble, you know, which was MNCs and innovators conducting clinical trials in India. India was a great destination because the cost effectiveness was a factor, the precision with which you would do, the knowledge which is sitting in India was very helpful. However, there were certain ethical issues in terms of induction of the patients, treatment of the patients, and whatever else in the unlikely event of a death happening. So all of that in the last 1 or 2 years, along with all the stakeholders, clinical trial companies, as well as government and legislators, DCGI and DBT, they have sorted out the issue. Now we have excellent guidelines which are in sync and in line with the global standards. And I think India, which earlier was rated as number 3 in the world for clinical trials for the innovation drugs, has slid very significantly in the last about 3-4 years. My sense is now with the legislation in place, ethical standards in place, all the stakeholders coming together, it's time for India to move on and regain its pristine status of an ideal clinical trial destination. And you know, it gels in beautifully, Nilesh, also with the fact that there is a great need for India to, you know, we are doing very well in biosimilars and, you know, generics as well as vaccines. But now is the time when India has to move on to the next level of performance, next phase, which is the innovation. And for that, you need clinical trials, ethical clinical trials,
I think
in
we
sync
have
with the global standards.
Yes, I think we have Mr. Jain. Mr. Jain, you know, this leads directly to the question that I have for you. In terms of the regulatory changes, you know, how is the pharma industry working with the government of India to actually simplify a lot of these processes? Because, you know, it is a difficult challenge. You know, on one side, you've got the ethics and you've got, you know, you're dealing with real people. At the same time, discovery and launching of new products and new drugs is super critical for the pharma industry. So from that perspective, Mr. Jain, we'd love to hear your sort of thoughts and ideas around, you know, what are we doing differently now, given what COVID has taught us?
So thank you very much, Nilesh. It is outstanding to be here with the outstanding panel, Dr. Y.K. Gupta, Dinesh, Umang, and all my friends here. So one is COVID is a great opportunity, and any adversity has to be converted into opportunity. And if I see last 2 months, just to give a background, India controls 60% of the vaccine market, 60% of HIV drug. So whatever is happening in the world today, as far as COVID is concerned, India is directly involved in it. And to see today's Professor Vijay Raghavan's statement in the Times of India front page, if we talk of vaccines, there are 4 vaccines which are being developed in India and 30 groups are working on it. Y.K. Gupta has been part of many of them. If you see repurposed drugs, whether it is HCQ, whether it is remdesivir, whether it is Flavipur, whether it is plasma therapy, outstanding work which is being done, and we call them repurposed drug, experimental drugs. Whether it is diagnostic kits, PPEs, ventilators, the kind of work which has been done in India is great. And what COVID gives the opportunity, anything which used to take 10 years, say vaccine development, we are talking now that we should be able to get it done in 1 year time. It takes around $3 billion to invest in vaccine. But what Indian government has done, and CDSCOs, ICMR, all have come together to give fast track approval. So if innovation has to happen, and why innovation is important, I will just give you the context. The whole global market, if I look at the market, 25% in terms of value is branded generic, 10% is incremental innovation, and 60% is new drugs. If India, we look at it, only we have got around 30-35% in the branded generic market. If I look at innovation and incremental medicine, our share is less than 2 to 3%. And what we need to do, we have to upgrade our value chain. And for that, we have submitted a report to the government of India. We are working with the principal scientific advisor. We are working with ICMR. And some of the guidelines which you have said, first is the regulatory reforms which have to come in. The government of India has set up a committee. Dr. Y.K. Gupta has been keenly involved on many of the regulatory initiatives in this country. Second is we are talking of innovation funding and some of the other areas I can cover it up. The time which takes for regulatory approval in US is around 30 months. In India, it is around 60 months, average I'm talking about. So there is a lot which can be done and a lot will be simplified, and government of India is seized with all the initiatives. Over to you, Nilesh.
Absolutely. I think this was a perfect leeway into my next question, especially when you talked about, how do we fund innovation? How do we actually look at policies that affect for India to take a center stage? With that, Mr. Umang and Mr. Arvind, I'd like to open the stage to you. Please do. I think all the panelists, please put on your video so the audience can also see you. But I think this does take a lot of capital, and I think India as a nation will also look at investments into these areas, from other countries and other institutions. And I think how do we open this up, from an innovation perspective, investment perspective? So that, with that question, Mr. Arvind, I'd love to hear about, how USAID is working, especially with this ecosystem in India to help and kind of booster innovation in this space. And Mr. Umang, would love to hear, what are we doing from a policy and a regulation perspective? Because that has a huge impact how India plays globally in this space.
Sure. Thank you, Nilesh, for that question. And thank you, CorpGini, for this opportunity. This is really a great initiative at this uncertain times. It's a good learning for all of us. I personally do not know much about the pharma industry, so this a few minutes has been very, very helpful to understand about the various developments. And many of you know about USAID. We are the US government's lead agency for developmental programs in several countries. In India, we have been working for about 70 years very closely with the with the government of India. And in the last 20 plus years, we have invested about $1.4 billion worth of programs. What started as a sheer donor aid has now transformed, and we are now more into a peer-to-peer program, and largely working with the government more towards technical assistance, bringing in innovations, engaging the private sector, and introducing innovative solutions. So we work largely with many of the, mostly with the national government, as well as with several state governments, and with a lot of industrial associations and business associations. Coming to a specific point on how is USAID fostering innovations, one of the biggest challenges for innovators is access to market and access to capital. And we have seen about several small innovations starting up, and then they do it in one health facility or one district, but they really find it difficult. But they really find it to scale it up across various states or the entire country. Also, there are challenges if you introduce the innovation in a private sector, how to get it introduced into a public sector. Those are also some of the challenges. So that's where we had partnered with the National Health Authority and introduced a new initiative called the Blended Financing Facility. This is aimed to be a $100 million initiative with about, to start with about 50 million primarily as grants for innovators. And then another $50 million is planned as a debt and equity option for corporates, because we feel that not all of them are only requiring a grant model, but several of them are also looking for good access to capital in terms of equity and debt. So this is a new initiative we have launched out. We have tie-ups with several banking institutions. S-Bank is one of those organizations that we have tied up, and we are providing a loan guarantee for about $40 million. We are having discussions with SBI. We are having discussions with Bank of America. So there's a lot of banking institutions, a lot of developmental organizations also who are interested in collaborating on this initiative. So we feel that this could be some sort of an institutional arrangement that we set up exclusively for the health program, where the National Health Authority over a period of time takes on the leadership role of identifying and introducing innovations into this program. Already the National Health Authority, as you may know, has what they call as a MAP, Market Access Program, which has got about 21,000 healthcare facilities. So a solution which could be introduced can be easily introduced into about 21,000 healthcare facilities, whether it's in the public or in the private sector. So that's a brief overview about our very recent initiative that we have undertaken. We are providing the technical support role. We are working with the NHA on shaping up this whole program. We are working with several of the other donors to bring in additional capital into this program. We are working in terms of putting a pipeline of various innovations, as well as in terms of day-to-day operations technical assistance.
This is amazing, Mr. Arvind, because I'm sure the startups who are listening to this webinar are jumping up and down, given that the capital announcement that you made, especially supporting the discussion, Mr. Umang. I think we left the conversation where we're talking about, India is going to be on the path of being a most populous country by 2030. And I think access to care is going to be one of the biggest challenges, right? I want to get your thoughts on, how India is shaping up to actually deliver that, given that we are completely committed to the SDG goals for WHO. So with that, Umang, I'll let you, give us your opinion on this.
Thank you, Nilesh, for this opportunity, and CorpGini for having me here. The buzzword today, and it is driven by the Prime Minister, is Atmanirbhar. So it has become, it's driving the government policies today. It's driving everything that's happening in India. So although, whether it's Dr. Dua or Sudarshan or the Honorable Minister, they all talked about India being the pharmacy to the world. And, we cater to the world. I mean, we've been able to produce medicines which are efficacious and affordable. And, whether it's ARV or oncology or any therapy for that matter, even in US, 80% of the medicines which are sold are generics, and a lot of them come from countries like India and from India. So having said that, but although we take, I'll be very short because I know we've short our times. So, but the major concern that we have, despite the fact that we take pride in saying that we are the pharmacy to the world, and we are, the dependence on some other countries for our active pharmaceutical ingredients, starting materials are a major concern for all of us. This is a issue which has been deliberated and decided, and debated for a long time. I think it's all started in 2011. And now, so this COVID has hit us, very hard. And then the realization has set in that we cannot, for this critical sector, which is pharmaceuticals, you cannot depend on any other country for the raw material that allows you to make those pharmaceutical products. So I'm glad, and that the government has woken up to it. There's a huge initiative which has been taken up by the government of India, and keeping that in mind, and we are trying to help the Indian industry and India to set up API manufacturing facilities, because it's extremely critical and important for us strategically also, because be it Europe or China, I mean, we cannot depend on any country for something so critical for making us the pharmacy to the world. So that is one. And secondly, when you talk about the healthcare, I think again the discussion has been on, and the minister touched upon it. That we need more doctors, paramedics, nurses to cater to our primary healthcare needs. Forget about COVID, where none of the countries, be it America or US, was prepared to face it. I mean, when you look at India, even post-COVID, pre-COVID, we needed more doctors, nurses, and the realization is set in even more now. So the whole medical education infrastructure needs to be augmented. And I think government is looking at it, looking at using the existing infrastructure, which is in terms of having the district hospital, which could be used for creating medical colleges, is being done by the government of India. They've already identified it. That initiative is already on. So what I would like to summarize and say is that, it's very, very important for us to, but the regulatory environment for that matter, when the Prime Minister said that our regulatory environment was cliquey and cumbersome, and this is his words, I think this was a wake-up call for everyone. And today we know that the Government of India and the Ministry of Health is working very hard and working, all the time to kind of streamline processes and streamline regulatory clearances and make them quick and in a more efficient manner. So I think when you look at, you asked me the question that, what do you think about the policies? I think going back, this Atmanirbhar word is going to drive us completely, be it about medical equipment, be it about pharmaceuticals, be it about the impediments that we have in making it, I think accessibility and affordability drives Indian pharmaceutical industry. And this is what the respect we earn from Africa, US, or Europe comes from that. So having said that, I think the key word, as I said, is going to be self-sufficiency, and that is what the government policies are going to be driven with. I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Nilesh.
Sorry. So it's very well put. I think moving forward as we get out of the COVID scenario, given what the pandemic has taught us in terms of both self-reliance, in terms of medical needs or healthcare needs, and also how innovation is going to be driven moving forward is going to be, central and super critical, because, we saw that a lot of countries will not come to support, from a primary factor if they're not self-sufficient or self-supported, right? So we have to actually look at this initiative. And I think to conclude our discussion today, I think innovation is going to be the centerpiece of this industry as we move forward, and also how the government is going to help us look at policy, regulation, relaxation of certain rules, and also expediting a lot of the processes. And I think that is going to help us evolve the pharma industry, moving forward, and how we actually quickly come out with new processes, new innovation, new technology, and new drugs. So with that, I would like to thank all our panel members, and also thank CorpGini for taking the initiative of having a healthy discussion on this topic.